Call the meeting to order. Will you please rise for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for July 21st, 2014. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
John Haverlick moved, Bob Lynn seconded to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call a roll?
Cindy.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Kurt.
Yes.
And they are unanimously approved. The next item up is the amendment and approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick, seconded by Nancy Strand to approve today's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Will the clerk call a roll?
John.
Yes.
Kurt.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
And Cindy.
Yes. The next item on the agenda is public hearings and bid awards, and we have a public hearing on Ordinance 2014-19, an ordinance providing for Chapter 14.16, entitled Electricity, updating current language to reflect Borough incorporation, and providing for rate restructuring and increases. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this item?
I'd like to talk about the rate increases.
If you could come to the microphone and identify yourself.
Sure, right now?
Sure.
I'm Patrick Wilson, Plant Manager of Petersburg Fisheries, and once in a while you have the privilege of having me come here. So anyway, we're busy right now with salmon season, everybody knows. My concern right now is the proposed schedule for electrical rate increases for the large commercial users. I propose that we keep the schedule as it has been in the past. I'm not at all opposed to an increase to reflect, obviously, cost of everything going up over the years. A small increase, I think, is warranted probably for the rate per kilowatt hour. But if you implement a new schedule, which would affect my operation, which I've been running now for 25 years, it would represent, I think, about 8.6% increase, which is a lot more, I think, than we had anticipated. If you take the two schedules, put them together over a 2-year time, and I think that's substantial. As you know, the town here in Petersburg relies heavily on the fishing industry. It's a blood life of this community. A number of years ago, we had part of our fleet pretty much taken away, relocated to Sitka because another town was much more competitive, had other opportunities. New business started up over there, robbed a lot of revenue from this town, which we are trying to make up. We still have a very good fleet here. We have a couple other companies working in this community, which has been very good long-term for this town. And I feel that it's important to remind the citizens, council members, city officials, that fishing is the lifeblood of this community. We need to be competitive. I'd like to see these rates stay somewhat reasonable and consistent with what we've had in recent years as far as the schedule goes. It's not a huge increase when you look at the dollars, being a corporation that we are, but it's still money that we can spend on improvements in other areas in the factory. If you look back at 2013, which was a massive season for our facility, we're a large electrical user. I think Joe would say we're probably the largest in town. Is that right? We pay our bills. We've been improving our facility over the past 5 or 6 years. We've spent probably maybe $6 million upgrading freezers, doing a lot of improvements to get more fish through the plant quicker so we can return more tax money to the community. I'm sure Icicle is a leader there as far as fish tax coming back to this community over the years. I'm sure millions of dollars have been poured into here from our processing operation. And I just want to make sure that people understand that it's important for us to be competitive in this day and age. I was quite surprised at how much of the fleet left this town and went to Sitka after they rolled out the red carpet for a new company that started up. That certainly has grown quickly, which is unusual for this day and age, but they really bend over backwards for them. I just want to make sure we're getting support here in town. So I'd like to have the council to please review the schedule. I propose it stays the same. I'm not afraid of raising the kilowatt hour rate a little, but I just don't want to see us spending money on electricity where we can invest it elsewhere, which would have longer term benefits for the company here. Other than that, we work with Joe. We got a power issue here this spring. We have to upgrade our major transformer at the facility. I hope we can get some relief from the city in doing that. It's not cheap. Joe did work with us and got a temporary one put in, which is great. We're waiting for the other one to get hooked up in the fall. But obviously, if we have a major power outage at our facility, this town will struggle greatly. It would be a disaster for us. So we're working with Joe to try to improve our electrical system there at the plant. We're still planning to expand down the road. But again, every little bit we got to pay out, whether it's electricity, garbage, water, whatever it may be. It's money we could spend elsewhere for improvements and making our facility better and more productive here in this town. So long term, I would like to see us continue down the road having competitive and reasonable rates. We've been very fortunate to have a steady power supply, a good water supply ever since they put the dam in. The city officials here have been great to work with over the years. We've had issues, and I think we've helped them out. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands every time we increase rates that it's looked at very seriously and the impact it will have on our community. That's all I have.
Patrick,
Yeah.
may I ask a
Yeah,
question,
go ahead, please.
What did, I believe the company in Sitka is Silverbow?
Silver Bay.
Silver Bay, I'm sorry. What did they offer the fleet to take them, the PFI couldn't?
Well, there's many reasons the fleet left, and being a competitor, I can't speak too much about it. Obviously, they got access to property at a very attractive rate. The city did quite a few, it caused a lot of issues with the other processors in town there, but the city did quite a few programs with them to allow them to start up the company fairly cheap versus somebody coming in and buying land, getting what they needed to start a new operation. But there's a lot of perks that the city allowed them that normal new businesses wouldn't have. Again, it did upset a lot of the other long-term processors in town, but they were able to convince the city that starting up their operation there would be good for them. And they, I think they did some either long-term leases that were very reasonable and cheap. A lot of other things they forgave or worked with them on to allow them to get in the door there, start their operation, and since then it's been quite a success story. There, I think they got maybe 5 plants now, one in Craig, one up in the Bay, one in Valdez, and they've grown terrific, to a pretty good size already. And they took away a lot of our highliners, in town here to the operation. One reason they left, they became investors so they could hopefully cash in someday like people did with Icicle when they started this company. So there's various reasons people left, but it wasn't for the help of the city there, they never would have gotten off the ground. There's no question about it.
Is there anything PFI can offer them to bring them back, or is it something once they're gone, they're gone?
It's some of them are stockholders now, so it's a little bit different. They own part of the company, unlike our situation nowadays. We used to be that way, but since we traded hands years ago, it's not quite the same program. You have a lot of younger people coming into the fisheries nowadays, taking over their parents' operations or whatever it may be, or getting into it. A lot of them saw an opportunity to jump over and be part of something new. Some people had other issues for whatever reason, felt there were other opportunities there. Various reasons they left, and some of them I can't go into here, but they just felt it would be a better program for them. And a lot of these boats that left here were, pretty good sized producers in town. And when they leave Petersburg, where they fish for Ocean Beauty, everybody lost some people. Petersburg Fisheries, Icicle Seafoods, or whoever, every time you have some of these boats leave, that takes, $1 million worth of product with them. It's a tough go. And to replace them is even more difficult. Obviously on huge seasons like last year where it was a state record, we expect this to be repeated possibly next year. A massive fleet is tough to deal with, but on slow seasons like this, you like to have as many boats as you can have to bring in the product. We're having an okay season this year. Chums have been a disappointment. Pinks are showing now, which is good. We expect it to be slow, but next year we're gearing up for a big season again, and we expect to put a lot of fish at the facility.
All right, thank
Any
you.
other questions? Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to ordinance 2014-19? Moving on, the next item is visitors' views related to the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to speak to an agenda item? Next up is visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. Is there anyone that would like to speak to an item that is not on our agenda today? And then we come to you, Mr. Miller. Next item is Kent Miller, who is the manager of the North End Ferry Authority. Mr. Miller will make a presentation on the North End Ferry Authority's plans to restore ferry service between Kaufman Cove, Wrangell, and South Mitkoff. Mr. Miller is seeking assembly support for the use of the Banana Point launch ramp as an interim ferry terminal.
Thank you. Actually, you just really gave my presentation. And with the packet that I submitted, I believe everyone got one, didn't you? Perhaps the main thing for me to do is to answer questions. However, I will say that I manage the North End Ferry Authority, which has been organized under Title 29 as an Alaska Municipal Port Authority. It's organized under the same statute as the IFA, of which City of Petersburg was formerly a member. The purpose of the North End Ferry Authority is to restore ferry service between Prince of Wales Island via Kaufman Cove, Wrangell, and Petersburg via South Mitkoff. We're now proposing to do that beginning in April of 2015 using a 28-passenger 7-car ferry, a boat that's currently in Wrangell, currently called the Silver Eagle, which will be renamed Rainforest Islander. As you probably know, this is the second iteration of our proposal to restore service. We had purchased a larger, faster boat to do this run, and also add a route between Kaufman Cove on Prince of Wales Island and Ketchikan. When we got bids for its overhaul and refit, they were too high for us to incorporate in the present financing, and we couldn't get additional financing. So we sold that boat and found that we could make a purchase and sale offer for this smaller boat, and we're still working with USDA under the original financing, have sufficient capital to put this boat into service. So the basis for our present project is the 28-passenger 7-car ferry that will make 4 trips a week between Kaufman Cove, Wrangell, and South Mitkoff year-round. The schedule runs Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, which we hope will offer an optimal number of opportunities for people to use the service on same-day round trips and 2-day, 1-night, and 3-day, 2-night overnights. In developing the service, our preference, our goal was to put the South Mitkoff ferry terminal back into service as well. And working with the state, which owns the terminal, we were asked to prepare a plan for berthing the present ferry at the terminal and loading and unloading traffic there. This boat is a lot smaller than the boat the terminal was designed for, which was the approximately 150 passenger 30-car Prince of Wales and Stikeen class of ferries. And it's a side-loading terminal. We have a landing craft, which is exclusively an end-loading boat, and it just didn't fit with the terminal's fendering system. So I included in the packet sent to you the terminal adaptations that we proposed to for South Mitkoff, that we proposed to DOT, and DOT, working with them, adopted these plans and estimated their cost. Unfortunately, the cost of putting in this pontoon adaptation at South Mitkoff Terminal was budgeted at $945,000, and that just wasn't in the cards for DOT to handle this year. DOT did say they would look at possibly working with us in future to bring the new Rainforest Islander into South Mitkoff Terminal. They'd like to see how we do, however, and I guess I can't blame them for that. After all, IFA couldn't continue its service. We've made some very important changes that we expect to enable us to continue this service, but nevertheless, skepticism is healthy. In a nutshell, going from the Prince of Wales class vessel, which has a crew of 5 and burns about 100 gallons of fuel an hour, we will be using a smaller vessel with a crew of 2 that burns 30 gallons an hour. Those are the main cost factors involved in running a ferry service, and by scaling the service down in this way, we've actually got it down to less than our revenue projections are based on actually slightly less than the volume that IFA carried in 2007. So you have before you the letter that I wrote to the Assembly on July 24th asking for your support for Rainforest Island's ferry use of the Banana Point launch ramp. And along with that, I sent a diagram of how our peak use would probably look at Banana Point at the same time as there would be relatively heavy use by boat trailers. And I believe you have that in your packet in front of you. I believe that the two uses are compatible. Our peak use would occupy the launching ramp for about a half an hour with the ferry actually on the ramp, meaning that small boat launching and pulling out traffic couldn't use the ramp at the same time. That would be beginning at about 1:53 in the afternoon, 4 days a week, on Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. The run-up to the boat docking and occupying the ramp would be that traffic would come in, get into a queue for loading, and that would take place for about half an hour before 1:53. Then after 1:53, the traffic would quite quickly disperse after getting off the ferry, and some people would be picking up passengers arriving on the ferry. So then the use of the ramp would be back to its normal pattern of putting in and taking out small craft. When we found we couldn't get to a plan that DOT could work with, DOT offered to write, as they put it, strong letters of support to the Petersburg Borough and to DNR supporting our application to use the Banana Point Terminal. And you have, I believe, Ruben Yost, the Deputy Commissioner, has sent his letter through. It is indeed a strong letter of support, and we wanted to, we're glad that he was able to submit that accompanying our proposed use. I know that any intrusion on a facility like Banana Point, which is one valuable facility for use by local recreational boaters and others, is always a sensitive issue, and one has to be concerned that the uses are compatible and not disruptive. In this case, we believe the use diagram that we submitted indicates compatibility, and hopes that it'll be possible for the Assembly to consider that. Along with looking at possible use of Banana Point, we also looked at use of Blackberry Point, and it's a fine facility. It's really in the river, though, and the water depth there and the potential for winter icing, the extra distance from town just really makes it not a practical location for this purpose. So our proposal is going to be to DNR, hopefully with the Assembly's support, to use Banana Point for an interim. And during that interim, we'd hope to work with DOT successfully, eventually being successful in convincing them this is going to be a steady ongoing service and that it's worth improving South Mitkoff Terminal to accommodate. In the meantime, it's really quite vital to getting the service going in April next year that we're able to have this interim fallback. So I think I've said pretty much all there is to say, but I'd be glad to answer questions.
Are there any questions?
Yes, I would really hope that this does work out for several reasons. One is that if the present terminal at the end of the island isn't used, then the state has to pay $15 million back to the feds for non-use of it, which is really going to hurt their budget in the future. So I think they have a strong incentive to work with you, which hopefully will come out. And the other thing is the long-range state plan for our area focuses on roads, so it must have been written by someone from Iowa, because it pretty much de-emphasizes ferries at all, which doesn't make sense for an island. So your service may be the only thing we ever have. So I'm glad to see you stepping up and moving in there. And the other thing I just see with like student athletics events and that, it'll save the town and parents thousands if they can take your boat back and forth. It'll be a lot more convenient than what we have now. So I'm really very supportive of this, of your program, and I hope it does work out.
Thank you. Well, we're going to do our best.
Yeah.
If I can ask. Obviously, that will significantly increase the use out there. And currently, Steve, we pay for the rest of pumping and trash and police.
We don't do any police except in very unique situations, but we do go out there for pumping out the vault toilet and picking up trash. And I believe DNR pays us for that service.
So do you see an increased cost to us, which we would bill or get from DNR, or where?
I can tell you what my initial reaction is. Carl, please weigh in if I get this wrong, which is currently we go out there on a scheduled basis. If the Rainforest Ferry takes off and there's a lot more usage out there, we may have to make more stops out there. I don't know that we can guess at this point what that would be.
Would that then be a cost of the boroughs, or would that go then to DNR?
Carl, you know how that contract reads?
Mayor and Assembly members Lynn, we would make either a pitch to DNR for additional funding, or maybe to Rainforest Ferries themselves to pick up the extra costs that we might incur.
I can comment on that as well.
Sure.
What we would propose is that we look at what has been spent in the past and the amount that DNR has reimbursed, and try to find a baseline based on your experience for the cost of maintaining that site. then we can do two things. One, we can agree that North End Ferry Authority will pay for the increment over that baseline. And two, I don't think that's necessarily going to do the whole job, because there may be spikes in our usage, and the usage might be different than the current recreational usage. So there may be more maintenance attributed to the use that we make. But I will say this, that based on those two approaches, one, looking at a baseline, adding to it proportional to our increased use, and two, looking at the specific requirements that we impose on the maintenance process, we'll pay for them. That's got to be a given, I would think. We want to pay our own way, and so you can count on us to work with your staff in providing a good formula for that.
My second question is, I'm hearing from users out there the concern that there's only a limited amount of parking, space there available. The question rises then, if we bring the additional traffic, or I don't know if we're going to double it, I've heard all kinds of figures, but the concern from the users out there is, even if you're only there for a 2-hour period, then obviously you take precedence. They're trying to get in and out. How do you propose, or what's your thought process of how to work out those what I'll call conundrums, where we have a conflict of interest here from the users?
Well, the first thing that we did was draft the diagram that is in your packet, showing our boat coming in with a full load and then a full load waiting to go out on it again. It represents mostly cars, of course, because they're the most space consumptive, but this diagram in your packet shows our boat coming in with its full load, which is 7 large vehicles the size of a Ford Expedition on the average. Some will be much bigger, some will be smaller. 3 motorcycles, 4 pallets or totes, and a forklift to handle the pallets and totes. That we show as being berthed at the end of the launching ramp. On the shore side, we show the 7 vehicles staged in the parking area, along with 3 motorcycles. And then we also show 4 vehicles which would be walk-on passengers, drop-off, and pickup rides. We also show our Ford Transit van, the van that will meet every arrival and departure, and will shuttle people to and from town and around town, people and freight, as a matter of fact. And then also we'll take people up and down the launching ramp. And then we show 2 trucks delivering, projected to deliver pallets to the boat that will be loaded and unloaded with forklift. But the thing that I liked best about it was not only the way it accommodated our traffic, but on the diagram you can see 14 trailer boat rigs parked. And we looked at the turning radiuses that they have, and the access routes for those vehicles and our traffic to get in and out of the Banana Point layout, and it really looks pretty good. I would say we didn't show quite every trailer parking space 2 blocked. There are room for at least 2 or 3 more, but those 14 represent, I would think, a pretty good estimate of peak demand there that's going to occur during those approximately 2 o'clock in the afternoon peak arrival and departure times for this ferry. And that's the first step. The second step would be to work with signage at the at Banana Point that would show people where to park in case nobody is there. One of the first vehicles that will arrive at the site, though, is going to be our transit van, And the driver of that transit van is going to attend the site while the boat is staging traffic for loading and also unloading. So there will be a person there to help direct traffic while the people are coming in. I think with the combination of, one, a logical way of staging the traffic, two, signage to tell people where to go, and then attention by one person with boots on the ground who's capable of giving good direction to people who are coming and going. Those would be the three elements of what we would think of as being a working arrangement.
So essentially, what you're saying is that the users then would just simply have to wait till you're loaded and gone or what have you. I'm talking about the local users there. Is that?
There would be a half an hour, 4 days a week, when our boat would be on the ramp, and that would take care of our unloading inbound and loading outbound. Now, beyond that, there would be our traffic coming in for a prior half hour, and then our traffic going out. And I would think that's going to be maybe 15 minutes or so. It'll just go quickly. But there will be a period of a bit less, I think, than an hour and a half when this facility will be impacted at all, and only 1/2 hour out of that when our use will really interrupt the use of the ramp itself. Boat trailers can certainly come and go during that time. I think the diagram shows plenty of room for them to maneuver. At the same time, our staging and loading, unloading is going on, but there will be that half hour when the ramp will be blocked.
I have a couple questions for you, one of which is what is your anticipated ridership on the average?
The total forecast ridership to and from South Mitkoff is about 6,000 passengers a year, and about a third that many vehicles.
So have you broken it out to a per day figure?
To a per day figure, that would be over, that's ridership in both directions, over about 200 days. And so in terms of vehicles, 2,000 vehicles over 200 days would be about 10 vehicles a day, 5 in each direction.
Okay. And passengers?
And the passengers would be about 3 times that many.
Okay, so your passenger van only holds 8, but you're telling me you think you anticipate 15 passengers on the vessel?
Well, the average passenger...
The reason that I'm asking that question is those people who don't take their vehicles are going to require potentially multi-hour or overnight parking in this parking area, which is somewhat limited in space. And it sounds like you're anticipating that your big crunch is going to be during the loading and offloading, but there may be other times where there's some constraints.
We hadn't thought of asking for overnight parking there, and I think that the service we offer is compatible with not providing overnight parking at the terminal. After all, even just in the neighborhood at Green's Camp, there is substantial parking for overnight use. But I will say that in respect to the passenger traffic pattern, on the average with both Marine Highway and IFA, about 2.5 passengers travel with each vehicle. So on a peak load, our 7 vehicles would carry about 17 passengers, leaving about 11 passengers per peak load who would not be traveling with a vehicle. Now, our van, actually, the one I included in the brochure is 8 to 11 passenger van. We thought if we use that, we'd set it up for 8 to start with a baggage space aft. It's going to be rigged for a trailer, but we weren't going to provide a trailer at the outset. This could still change. I have a hunch that when our board looks at actually buying this van, they're going to say, look, for another $3,000, we can get the longer model that will carry 11 to 15. So in fact, our van capacity could be higher. So the basic plan is start as low as 8, but go to 11 when that capacity is needed, adding a trailer if necessary, or 2, going to a start of 11 right at the beginning, with the potential of going to 15 and adding a trailer. So I think that in worst case scenario where there aren't any drop-offs and pickups by people related to passengers traveling, and I'm figuring 4 cars related to that, who will be family members or friends dropping lodge vans, for example, dropping passengers or picking them up at the terminal. I think that our intent is to provide for all passengers who want to ride the van when it's coming and going. And I guess one thing supporting that is using launching ramps. We don't want to make people walk the ramp. Not that that isn't a very good ramp for walking, but launching ramps just have a way of accumulating seaweed and stuff that isn't good for people to walk on. So the actual transit van will shuttle the walk-on passengers up and down to the boat. So there will always be people, and I might be one of them, who will want to wear my red rubber boots and walk it. But if people don't want to walk it, they can take the van, and the van's going to be capable of doing that job. So that will probably determine the peak seating that we have on that vehicle.
Mm-hmm. And have you determined, and I would think that you have, but I don't see it in your business plan, anticipated fares for cars and for walk-on passengers?
Yes, actually, I never remember numbers, so I better look this up. The fare between, I'll just look it up, then I won't have to correct myself.
And may I ask, is that fan blowing on you? And if it is, we can turn that off. Is that fan blowing on you, or is it
it's just
blowing the
right.
other way? Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Right. In fact, I would think that it's good to keep the fan blowing on the podium to keep the speakers kind of cool. Nothing like getting too hot when you're at the podium. So the fares would run that are budgeted are Kaufman Cove to Petersburg is $45 for the average passenger fare, and it'll be $115 for the average vehicle fare. Kaufman Cove to Wrangell to Petersburg is $25 for the average passenger fare, and $65 for the average vehicle fare. Our van fare between Petersburg and South Mitkoff will be $8, and that'll square with the Marine Highways fare from Petersburg to Wrangell of $33. So we'll attempt to get into that same ballpark. Between Kaufman Cove and Wrangell, it's $40 for the passenger fare and $100 for the vehicle fare. These vehicle fares are based on that Ford Expedition size vehicle. So if you have, for example, a Subaru Forester, it's going to be about 10% less than that.
Okay.
And these are average fares, so there will be discounts for students, for seniors, for disabled passengers, as well as some seasonal fares. And we'll have a little different approach to vehicle fares than IFA and Marine Highway do. Generally, in off seasons, they give you a driver free fare. But to my eye and the numbers that I do, that always plugs the car deck and leaves the passenger house pretty empty. So instead, we're going to use a car free fare. It's pretty well established that 2.5 passengers per car tend to ride the passenger vehicle ferries in this area. On the other hand, Subaru Forester will hold 4 passengers, and that additional revenue is capable of actually taking the place of the vehicle fare. So if you load 4 passengers in a Subaru Forester, the car will go free, or it can be a motorcycle with 2 people on board, a kayak with 2 people accompanying. If you go up to an F-350 King Cab, then you're going to have 6 people. Or if it's a school van, a 15-passenger Econoline, for example, with 12 people on board, or a 12-passenger with 9 people on board, then the vehicle will go free. That way we hope to keep that passenger house busy without plugging the car deck. And also we hope it'll facilitate families, groups of rooters for ball games, hunters and fishermen to use the ferry more economically than they might otherwise be able to do.
Well, it definitely sounds like an interesting proposal, and I understand that you're asking for support from the Assembly. Are you looking for general support or a letter to DOT? Exactly what are you requesting?
Well, we'd love to have your general support. If the Assembly were capable of expressing the opinion that this is worth doing and a benefit to Petersburg, that would be ideal. Beyond that, if you could offer a letter of support to DNR, which, as you know, owns and operates the terminal with your borough assistance, I should think vital assistance, then that would be, I think, really necessary for DNR to know when they get our application for the interim use.
I really appreciate your attention to detail in your business plan. Reading this over when it came through, the few questions I had have been well asked already. In short, I very much support this and hope that we do write a letter of support to DNR, and I wish you long-term continued success in this endeavor. I think it'll be great for Southeast.
Thank you. I really appreciate your saying that. And,
You're welcome.
we hope to do a good job for this community and the whole service area.
And at this point, entertain a motion?
I would move to write a letter to DNR and to DOT saying that this service would greatly enhance transportation for Petersburg and Southeast Alaska, and we're very much in support.
I would second that.
It's been moved by John Haverlick and seconded by Jay Stanton Gregor that we send a letter to DNR and DOT in support of the let me call it the right thing, Rainforest Islands Ferry. Is there any discussion?
Would you be willing to add to that we take a look at it after, if DNR was willing to approve it, that it be relooked at it after about 6 months to see if you can iron out what conflicts may come up between the other users and Rain Trees users?
You bet. I think we would want to monitor that, and I would do as much as I could personally to make sure that things are going smoothly there. I think one advantage we have is that your Public Works Department, Carl Hagerman and Chris Cotta, have been very much involved with not only Banana Point, but the other improvements in that area. And they've certainly helped us a lot in understanding how to make a proposal that might work. So, yes, we're going to monitor it continuously, and at the point where we can make a breakthrough toward South Midcoff, or whether there has to be some change in the operating arrangement we have, we're going to be there, and you can count on that.
Bob, I'd be open to that, because I think with anything we do, we have to be looking at how it impacts the community. So I would just take that for granted, but I agree.
Okay.
Okay, we have a, do you want a second on that? Or just incorporate it in the original? Okay.
I'm sorry. That's what I meant, yes.
Is there any further discussion on this? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
John,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
and Cindy.
Yes.
Thank you a
very
lot
much, Mr.
for
Miller.
letting me burst in on your meeting, and I really appreciate your support, for your consideration and support.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is board, commission, and committee reports, and there were none submitted. And there were no items for the consent agenda. The next item up is report of other officers. Is there anyone that has a report they wish to share? Moving on to the mayor's report, and it is fairly short. The first item is the resignation from the hospital board. Tom Abbott has submitted his letter of resignation from the hospital board effective September 25th. Tom has served on the board since October 2001, and the ballot for the October 7th, 2014 borough election will include this vacancy, and I want to thank Tom for his lengthy service. It's been very valuable. Item 2 is the Southeast Transportation Plan. Alaska Department of Transportation will be conducting a public meeting on the plan Wednesday, August 13th. That will be here in Assembly Chambers. The public meeting will consist of an open house from 5:30 until 6:30 p.m. with a public meeting from 6:30 until 8:30 p.m. And residents are encouraged to attend the meeting to better understand this 20-year plan. Borough staff has delayed preparing a draft comment letter to the plan for Assembly consideration until after the August 13th public meeting, and ADOT is accepting public comment on the draft plan until September 30th, 2014. And I believe that's an extension. Originally, I think it was an August 30th cutoff. And the last item is Mental Health Trust annual land sale. The Alaska Mental Health Trust Land Office will be offering approximately 58 parcels of land from across the state for sale this October. To obtain purchase procedures and view maps of the properties being offered for sale, visit their website at www.mhtrustland.org. Properties being offered within the Petersburg Borough are at Falls Creek Subdivision, Mile 7.5, and the Sea Duck Subdivision, which is Papkeys. And I also know that the bulletins are available at the chamber, and they may also be available at the library. I was going to check before our meeting, but I didn't get a chance to do that. All right. Next up, the manager's report. And if you need me to fill in for you, just holler.
Fine, thank you. The replacement lighting project in the South Harbor is getting near to be complete at this point. At the next high tide on August 13th, Joe's group should finish that up. And the old fixtures were actually mounted on pilings, which makes them difficult to access except at high tide. But we should have that project done. Power and Light is getting ready for the new line extension for the drive-down facility, so you'll see their work down there. We're also planning to do quite a bit of right-of-way clearing this fall. And Power and Light's going to be borrowing Wrangell's high-reach bucket truck for that effort. Basically, it would be a big help along Sandy Beach, where we try to get some trees away from the power lines. Due to a lack of interest, interestingly enough, and scheduling conflicts by potential bidders, the bid for the library landscaping project has been canceled. We're intending at this point to rebid the project in late fall for the construction in spring of 15. We just had no bidders. Our two local contracts that might have been interested in doing the hardscape portion of that were so busy that they pretty much told us they couldn't bid on it, so we'll delay it for a while, won't hurt anything, and then we'll try again. The library's 2014 Summer Reading Challenge completed on July 29th. Over 100 kids registered for the program, and 46 completed it. Kind of a thank you to all the local businesses, clubs, organizations, and individuals who helped make this program a huge success. Special thank you to the Emblem Club for overseeing the refreshments at the pool party. The library's grant-funded project to digitize and preserve photos and other records of Tlingit culture in the community is nearing completion. The archiving effort got started in January and will continue through the end of August. Digital copies of materials are being added to the Alaska Digital Archive. Also, in the same kind of vein, all editions of the 2013 Petersburg Pilot have now been added to the library's digital archive for the local newspapers. The assessors will be here at least till August 15th. If anyone would like to meet with them, they can call the finance office at 772-4425, and we can set them up with the assessors. Our Borough annual audit is being conducted this week, so we'll have auditors here, and Jody's staff and several of us will be involved with them. The end of July utility bills will see rate increases for water, wastewater, and sanitation as part of that original rate study that those enterprise funds made a year ago. So just heads up to everyone. We have sent letters and information to the telephone companies about the increased E911 surcharge, which was beginning with the September billing. Residents will be notified in their July utility bill, and a public notice was posted in the newspaper last week. And then we're kind of following up with them to make sure they received it. That is, the companies involved. The preliminary estimates for upgrades to the Haugen Drive sewer system is approximately $150,000. This is, we're working with ADOT on a reimbursable services agreement so that work could be done while they're doing the paving project that would take place in 2015. This will be a request that will come to the Assembly to get approval and would be funded out of the wastewater utility fund. Public Works staff will seek grant funds from ADEC for 70% of the proposed improvements, although we probably will not have an answer on whether that will be grant funded by the time we need to approve it. Rock and Road has pretty much finished up with the landfill slope stabilization project. Grass seed has been added to the slopes. The surfacing has been addressed, and the site grading continues, or is that one done, Carl?
We're just about done.
Thank you. Jesse and the Public Works staff are beginning to beautify the whale watching observatory. We hope to have phase 1 done this summer and phase 2 of that project done next summer. You see some trees and some landscaping that we've put out there at this point. The Harbor Development and Comp Plan Evaluation Committee met on July 29th to do a preliminary reviews of the 5 proposals received. The next step, which will actually be this afternoon, will be a video conference where we will ask several, or telephone conference, where we ask several of the consulting firms some questions on their proposals and their approaches to some of the unique issues we feel are important to Petersburg. I have asked the department heads, the school, and the hospital to take a look at and update their information on the capital project list. Any changes or updates will be made to the list and then provided to the Assembly for discussion and prioritization at a meeting in September or early October. This again will be the list that we will then give to the governor's office and the legislature. Jordan Stafford has been hired as our new activities coordinator at Mountain View Manor. Lynn tells us that she's doing really well with the residents and has got a lot of new ideas and energy to help that process up there. Assisted living is full. We have 1 vacant elderly housing apartment which will be filled this week, and then we have wait lists at both buildings. So it's continuing to hold up that they're full. Completion of the water line replacement project at Mountain View Manor was delayed. After we excavated the project, we found that some of our old maps were inaccurate. Pipe sizes were not what we thought they would be. So new valves and connectors, what we needed, have been ordered, and the project will be rescheduled once we have the correct materials on hand. State health officer inspected the jail kitchen. We were a little worried about that. This is what we use to prepare inmate food. We do not currently meet the requirement to have because of not having a sink in the prep area. We were also required to purchase 2 meat thermometers. No other deficiencies were noted at this time. The last inspection was about 10 years ago, so we consider that a win at this point. Not sure we'll be as lucky next time around. On July 24th, Chief Swihart attended an after-action review with the hospital, fire, and EMS folks following the explosive detonation issue. Good collaboration and informational sharing. Police will be providing some training to the hospital staff on response to, those types of incidents in the future. So, again, part of our process of following back up when we have something like that occur, so we can learn from it and make other changes. And last, the Alaska Public Safety Information Network did a validation audit, and their formal results showed an error rate of 0% in the police department on their record side. So great job by Angel and the dispatch staff for keeping us in line there. That's it. That's just questions. Yes, sir.
Gotten a few more complaints, concerns about the shelter at Sandy Beach. Is that done?
Roof. Boy, I didn't go down there this morning.
I was there a couple days
speak.
ago, and it wasn't.
They were working on the roof. They had the sheathing on the back side. I don't think it was on the front sides, but I don't know what was accomplished this morning or late Friday. We had some delays with the availability of the maintenance staff that was going to do the roofing, and that set us back about a week. As I understand it, and I don't see Donnie here, but the roof project should be done this week or next, and then the shelter will be open for use in the evenings and on the weekends. We've got some finished work that'll take place over time, but the shelter will be available for folks. I don't have a more up-to-date answer on that, but I can follow back up.
Just to follow up on that, you mentioned there were delays a week ago. What were the delays due to? Referring to the shelter, of course.
Yeah, we expected the maintenance crew to be able to be at the roofing job, and evidently they had forgot about some previous commitments for Little League. And so 2 of the members were out of town. A third was on vacation, so we didn't have the staff up there to actually start on it. That was one issue. The other was there was some, once they got to putting the roof on, they found some where it wasn't quite going together like they wanted it to, so they had to alter the plans and adjust for that. I don't know that took them more than a day or 2 to figure out, but there was a delay associated with that.
No, so thank you.
But
just curious.
But I will follow back up. I apologize I didn't have a more up-to-date answer.
That's good.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Steve.
Yes, ma'am.
Moving on to unfinished businesses, we have an ordinance for second reading. Prior to adjournment of the July 21st, 2014 Assembly meeting, it was discovered that Assembly Member Haverlick was on the phone during the meeting and could hear the meeting proceedings, but could not communicate with the Assembly by making his voice heard over the phone connection. The Assembly noted that if his voice would have been heard, the outcome of the vote may have been different, and there was a unanimous roll call vote at the July 21st meeting, with the Assembly authorizing the second reading of the ordinance to be reconsidered at this meeting, and the ordinance is 2014-12, the sunset of senior citizens sales tax exemption referral to the voters in the second reading. And I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick, seconded by Nancy Strand, that we reconsider this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Hearing none? I'm sorry.
Well, I just greatly appreciate the Assembly giving me this opportunity. I was at a rest stop and did make some new friends, but I was really trying to get this through, and I had no idea you guys weren't able to hear me. So I appreciate you giving me this option.
And I have to say, and I talked to Kathy this morning about this, I still have concerns about this ordinance. I think that it it does a couple things. One, it's very arbitrary in the date, and some people it will apply to, and some people it will not, which I'm not in favor of. The other issue is that there's a conflicting ordinance that may or may not get approved by the voters. So this may sunset, and the one that I'm referring to is the grocery and fuel ordinance, which if this applies and that also gets voted in, the grocery and fuels potentially would sunset in 4 years. But that's not written in stone. I think we'd have to have the lawyer look at it and decide which supersedes what. And that's in part why I am not in favor of this. I don't like confusing ordinances, and I don't like ordinances that aren't applied fairly. And my other concern with it is the very arbitrary 2019 start date. It seems like if we're going to vote this in, we should vote it in and have it start when the other ordinances are scheduled, which would be January of next year. So I am still voting no on this. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call a roll?
No.
John,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy.
No. And I didn't keep count.
It passed.
Okay.
Sorry.
4-2.
4-2. Moving on to ordinance. Actually, now we're going to ordinances for the next ordinance for second reading is ordinance 2014-19, an ordinance providing for 14-16 entitled Electricity, updating current language to reflect borough incorporation and providing for rate restructuring and increases. I will entertain a motion.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick and seconded by Nancy Strand to consider this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Yes.
and Nancy.
Yes.
And that ordinance passes. Moving on to ordinances for third and final reading. Ordinance 14-12A, the ordinance limiting senior citizen sales tax exemption to those who have obtained and maintained an exemption based on a qualifying application submitted by December 31st, 2019. The ordinance, if passed by the Assembly, will be presented to the voters at the October 7th, 2014 election. If approved by the voters, no senior exemption cards would be issued after December 31st, 2019. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick and seconded by Nancy Strand that we approve this ordinance. Is there any discussion?
If I may? My standard bi-weekly comment that, although I may, as a citizen not want to vote for some of these, as an Assembly person, I feel it's my duty to make sure at this point that the voters get to decide, so I will most certainly be voting for it.
Anyone else? Will the clerk call the roll?
Jay,
Yes.
Yes.
Cindy,
No.
John,
Yes.
Mark, here, Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
And the ordinance passes. Moving on to ordinance 2014-13, an ordinance eliminating the senior citizen sales tax exemption applicable to non-borough state residents. If passed by the Assembly, the ordinance will be referred to the voters at the October 7th, 2014 municipal election. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick and seconded by Nancy Strand to consider the the ordinance. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kurt.
Yes.
And that ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to ordinance 2014-14, an ordinance limiting the senior citizen sales tax exemption to the purchase of groceries and residential heating fuel. If passed by the Assembly, this ordinance will be referred to the voters at the October 7th, 2014 municipal election. I will entertain a motion for this ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick. Was that John or Jay?
Jay.
It's been moved by Jay Stanton Greger and seconded by Bob Lynn that we consider this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes.
And that ordinance passes unanimously. Next up is ordinance 2014-15, an ordinance raising the sales tax exemption cap from $1,200 to $2,000. If passed by the Assembly, the ordinance will be referred to the voters at the October 7th, 2014 municipal election. I will entertain a motion for this ordinance.
So, second.
It's been moved by Bob Lynn and seconded by John Haverlick that we consider this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
John,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes. And that ordinance passes unanimously. Next up is ordinance 2014-16, an ordinance establishing a one-year residency and physical presence requirement for purposes of obtaining a senior citizen's sales tax exemption. If passed by the Assembly, this ordinance will be referred to the voters at the October 7th, 2014 municipal election.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick, seconded by Nancy Strand to consider this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
John,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
and Bob.
Yes.
And that ordinance passes unanimously. Next up is ordinance 2014-17, an ordinance providing to impose an excise tax on cigarettes and other tobacco products. If approved by the Assembly, the ordinance will be referred to the voters at the October 7th, 2014 municipal election. If approved, a wholesale excise tax of $2 per pack of cigarettes, plus an annual consumer price index adjustment, and 45% of the wholesale price on other tobacco products will be placed on those products that are brought into the borough to be offered for sale. I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by John Haverlick, seconded by Nancy Strand to consider this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
and Nancy.
Yes.
And that ordinance passes unanimously. And the last ordinance for consideration is ordinance 2014-18, an ordinance providing for Chapter 3.85, which is the Historic Preservation chapter of the Municipal Code, and providing for an appointed advisory commission. At the June 2nd meeting, the Assembly was presented with a petition signed by 50 borough residents requesting that the prior city ordinance number 827 be readopted as a borough ordinance. The supporters of the petition informed the ordinance would promote and enhance knowledge of the history of Petersburg. The ordinance was amended on July 7th to provide for the dissolution of the Historic Preservation Commission if the commission fails to meet within any 2-year period. I will entertain a motion.
So move.
Second.
Been moved by John Haverlick, seconded by Bob Lynn to consider this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
and Nancy.
Yes.
And that ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to new business, there's none on the agenda that I see. Next up is communications. Does anybody have any communications to report? The next item is assembly discussion items, recognitions. Does anyone have any recognitions?
I have one discussion item, and I probably should have brought up when we went on the electrical rate increases, but I was wondering, since the 2% isn't standard across the board, like Patrick was mentioning, I was wondering if we could, I think pages 16 and 17 of the study showed that what the rates would mean to at different levels, and I was wondering if we could publish that in the pilot, so people would know what to expect.
If I may. Joe sent that to me as well. Joe Nelson did.
I think it's a great idea, and explain that to Joe, and I think he's going to make arrangements to do that unless the assembly doesn't want it done. So we took your idea and ran
Yeah.
with it, basically.
I was going to say, it makes, I think that's public knowledge. There's no reason to conceal that, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
The other thing that I wanted to reiterate to the dispatch office, that the 0% rate was excellent. I was really pleased to see that.
Thank you.
And so please congratulate your staff, Officer Swihart. Is there anything else? The next item up on the agenda, I believe, is Kurt's, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And the meeting is adjourned.